The backyard glowed like a dream under a lattice of fairy lights, their amber flickers dancing across the faces of friends, family, and colleagues who'd gathered to celebrate me, Lydia Harper, the woman who'd spent a decade clawing her way out of the shadows. It was June 15, 2024, and I stood there in my graduation gown, the black fabric heavy with the weight of 10 years of night classes at Brighton Community College, 10 years of double shifts at Millie's Diner with grease-stained hands and blistered feet, 10 years of putting my husband, Dr. Ethan Caldwell, first. My fingers fumbled with the tassel on my cap, adjusting it for the 100th time, not out of nerves about the ceremony I'd just survived, but from a wild, pulsing excitement that tonight, finally, I'd have my moment. After a lifetime of being the silent partner to Ethan's ambition, his residency, his promotions, his late-night surgeries, I'd earned this degree in financial analysis, a testament to every sacrifice. I'd buried under diner tips and forced smiles. Nora Bennett, my best friend since we were awkward teens sneaking cigarettes behind the gym, emerged from the crowd, her auburn curls bouncing as she pressed a champagne flute into my trembling hand. "Lydia, you're a damn vision," she said, her hazel eyes glinting with pride. "Though I'll die on this hill those sparkly heels I picked out would have made you a queen tonight." I laughed, a shaky sound, glancing down at my sensible black pumps, scuffed from years of practicality. "These won't send me tumbling off the stage. Ethan's going to lose his mind when he sees me up there." Nora squeezed my shoulder, her touch warm and steady. "Speaking of your scalpel-wielding hero, where is he? Saving the world again?" I pulled my phone from my purse, no texts, no calls, just the blank screen I'd grown used to. "Surgery ran late," I said, my voice a practiced shield against the doubt gnawing at me. "He swore he'd make the party, though." Nora raised an eyebrow but let it drop, turning to adjust a string of lights that had slipped from its perch. The ceremony earlier had been a kaleidoscope of sound and motion-dean speeches about resilience droning over the auditorium's hum, the rustle of gowns as names were called, the weight of my diploma in my hands when Lydia Harper echoed through the mic. I'd crossed that stage with my head high, every step a rebellion against the nights. I'd spent studying by the diner's flickering fluorescent lights, the promotions I'd declined to keep us tethered to Ethan's residency in Boston, the family I'd left behind in Oregon when he'd said, "This is our shot, babe." I'd done it all for us, for him, believing we were a team, that my sacrifices were bricks in the life we'd built together. Now, as Nora's party unfolded around me, the backyard a wonderland of white linens, jazz notes curling through the air, guests from Millie's and my new job at Harper and Stone Investments, toasting my triumph, I let myself believe I'd finally carved out something of my own. "To Lydia, the graduate who never quits," someone shouted, glasses clinking like chimes. I raised mine, smiling, until a voice cut through the warmth like a blade through bone. "There's my graduate." Ethan's deep timbre rolled across the yard, turning heads as he strode through the gate. Still in his teal scrubs, his dark hair tousled from hours under a surgical cap. Exhaustion carved lines into his handsome face, but that charm, the one that had swept me off my feet 12 years ago at a hospital. Gala still sparkled in his hazel eyes, disarming as ever. "Sorry I'm late, babe," he said, arms opening wide as I stepped into them, the crowd parting like water. Emergency appendectomy kid was touch and go. I hugged him, the sharp sting of antiseptic flooding my senses, a scent I'd come to know as well as his laugh. "You're here now," I murmured, relief softening the edges of my unease. "That's all I care about." He pulled back, his hands resting on my shoulders, but his eyes darted across the yard, restless, evasive, searching the faces bathed in fairy light. "Actually, Lydia," he said, his voice dropping, "there's something I need to tell you. Something big." My stomach lurched, a cold dread snaking up my spine. I knew that tone, the one he'd used when he'd announced we were leaving Portland for Boston, when he'd promised it'd be worth it, when he'd rewritten our life with a single breath. "Can it wait?" I asked, gesturing to the guests, their laughter a fragile wall against whatever storm he carried. "We're in the middle of—" "No," he cut in, louder now, his words slicing through the hum of celebration. "It can't wait. I've been seeing someone." The air vanished. The chatter dissolved into a dull roar, swallowed by the hammering of my pulse in my ears. Nora's sharp gasp punctured the silence behind me, a needle through the fabric of the night. "What?" My voice was a whisper, a thread snapping under the weight of his words. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, that nervous tick. I'd once found charming, now a signal of ruin. "Her name's Cassandra Von Cassie. She's a resident at Street Luke's. We've been together 6 months. I'm leaving you for her." A glass slipped from someone's grip, shattering on the patio tiles with a crack that jolted me like a slap. 6 months? The question clawed its way out, my mind reeling through those endless nights. Emergency case. Babe can't leave. While I'd pored over textbooks, balancing our bills, scraping together payments for his med school loans with every dollar I earned, pouring coffee and wiping counters. "I'm sorry," he said, his tone flat, rehearsed, but his eyes weren't on me. They were locked beyond me, on her. I turned, and there she stood, Cassie Vaughn, poised near the edge of the party, her designer dress clinging to a frame younger than mine, her blonde hair catching the lights like spun gold. She looked uneasy, her arms crossed, but her jaw was set, her presence a dagger twisting in my gut. She'd been here all along, sipping my champagne, watching my victory unravel. "You brought her here?" My voice broke free, raw and feral, rising above the stunned silence. "Told me graduation." Ethan reached for her hand, his calm infuriating. "I thought it'd be better this way, honest. A clean break, a fresh start." Nora surged forward, her arm around me like a lifeline. "You need to leave, both of you, right now." But I couldn't let him walk away. Not yet. Not after everything. 10 years, Ethan!" I shouted, stepping toward him, my gown flapping like a tattered flag. "I worked myself to the bone at that diner, hands bleeding, back breaking to put you through school. I left my parents, my home, my whole damn life for your career, and you repay me with her?" "Lydia, listen," he started, his hands up, placating, but I was beyond reason. I snatched a champagne flute from the nearest table, my fingers trembling as I hurled it at his feet. The glass shattered, spraying liquid across Cassie's pristine heels. She yelped, stumbling back, and Ethan's arm shot out to steady her, his eyes flashing with something anger. Guilt. I couldn't tell. "Get out," I screamed, my voice a roar that echoed across the yard, rattling the fairy lights. They turned, hurrying toward the driveway as the party collapsed, guests muttering awkward farewells, gathering coats and purses, their footsteps a retreat from the wreckage. I stood frozen, the lights above me mocking what should have been my triumph, until Nora's arms caught me as my knees buckled. "I've got you," she whispered, her voice fierce through her own tears. "Let them go. We'll figure this out." Watching Ethan usher Cassie into the silver Audi we'd picked out together last spring, my bonus from Millie's footing half the bill, something shifted inside me. The shock burned away, leaving a core of molten resolve. This wasn't just heartbreak. This was a betrayal that demanded answers, a wound that wouldn't heal without blood. The next morning, sunlight sliced through the blinds of our shared home office, glinting off Ethan's laptop left behind in his rush to escape with Cassie. I sat there, still in yesterday's clothes, my gown a crumpled heap in the corner, a cold coffee mug beside me growing colder. Nora appeared, setting a fresh one down, her face etched with worry. "Lydia, you need to eat something. You've been staring at that thing since dawn." "Not until I know what else he's hiding," I said, my voice rough but firm, a steel I hadn't known. I possessed sharpening with every breath. My fingers hovered over the keys, then typed his password June 12, 2013, the night we'd met at that gala, unchanged after all these years. The screen flared to life. Patient records, email threads, bank statements, a digital vault of secrets he'd never bothered to lock. My financial analyst instincts kicked in, honed by years of balancing diner ledgers, and now sharpened at Harper and Stone. I scrolled through our joint account, my breath catching as I spotted them transfers, thousands of dollars flowing to an account I didn't recognize, starting 6 months ago, the exact moment Cassie had slithered into our lives. Nora leaned over my shoulder, her curls brushing my cheek. Hospital expenses? Equipment or something? No, I said, my hands trembling as I clicked deeper. These are personal, big, regular, buried under layers of bullshit. The doorbell rang, a harsh chime that made us both jump. Nora went to answer while I kept digging emails about consulting fees from a vague LLC, cryptic notes about deliveries with dates that matched Ethan's late-night shifts. Lydia, doctor. Marcus Reyes called, stepping into the room, his voice a lifeline pulling me from the abyss of data. Ethan's colleague and one of the few doctors who'd ever treated me like more than an appendage, Marcus looked out of place in jeans and a faded Red Sox tee, his wiry frame tense, his dark eyes shadowed with something heavy. If you're here to defend him, I began, my tone a blade. I'm not. He cut in, raising his hands in surrender. You need to know something about Cassie Vaughn. She's not just a resident, she's Leonard Vaughn's daughter, the hospital board chairman. Ethan's been on a rocket since they got together. My laugh was bitter, a jagged edge cutting through the air. So he traded me for a trophy with a trust fund. Marcus glanced at Nora, then lowered his voice, stepping closer. It's dirtier than that, Lydia. I've heard whispers missing prescription pads, procedures signed off without oversight, numbers that don't add up. I've tried sniffing around, but every time I get close, the trail vanishes. Leonard's got it sealed tight. My fists clenched, nails biting into my palms until I felt the sting. Ethan's in on it. Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. He's not the guy I knew in med school anymore. Back then, he wanted to save lives, not just win. Now, I don't know how deep he's sunk, but it's bad, and it's been brewing longer than 6 months. The room tilted slightly, the weight of his words pressing down. Why tell me now? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside. Because you were always good to me, he said simply. You deserve to know what you're really up against. After Marcus left, I dove back into the laptop, hours blurring into a haze of coffee and adrenaline. I traced the money offshore accounts in the Caymans, payments masked as services rendered, dates aligning with Ethan's supposed heroics in the cases he'd bragged about over takeout dinners while I nodded, proud and blind. Look at this, I said, pointing as Nora hovered, her presence a quiet anchor. These transfers match procedures he claimed brought in bonuses, big ones. But they're not going to Street. Luke's, they're going somewhere else. I plugged in a USB drive, copying every file, every email, my pulse racing like a war drum. My phone buzzed Ethan. Need my laptop for work. Dropping by in 30. Perfect timing, I muttered, finishing the transfer as the last file zipped onto the drive. Nora, can you give me the room? I need to face him alone. She hesitated, then nodded, slipping out with a look that said she'd be close if I needed her. 20 minutes later, Ethan strode in, his key jangling in the lock, his scrubs swapped for a crisp white shirt and jeans that hugged his frame like a second skin. He looked different, sharper, colder, a stranger wearing the face of the man I'd loved. Where is it? He demanded, no greeting, no softness, his eyes scanning the room like a predator. I gestured to the coffee table, the laptop sitting there like a loaded gun, right where you left it, along with whatever scraps of integrity you had left to lose. He froze, his gaze snapping to mine, narrowing. What the hell's that supposed to mean? Just curious, I said, my voice deceptively light. A blade wrapped in silk, How many fake prescriptions paid for Cassie's wardrobe? Or that beach house weekend you claimed was a conference? His jaw tightened, the color draining from his face, leaving him ashen. You've been in my files? He hissed, stepping closer, his breath hot with panic. I'm an analyst, Ethan. I shot back, standing to meet him, my height matching his for once. I follow money for a living. Yours? It's screaming offshore accounts, consulting fees, secret payouts. What's Leonard Vaughn buying with it? He snatched the laptop, clutching it to his chest like a shield, his knuckles white. You're delusional, Lydia. You think you can touch me with this? I'm a surgeon respected, connected. Leonard's got my back, and you've got nothing but a grudge and a cheap degree. Records lie, I said, stepping into his space, my voice low and lethal. But numbers don't. Keep smirking, see how long it holds when the truth cuts through. He backed toward the door, his sneer faltering, replaced by a flicker of fear I'd never seen before. Go ahead, play your little game. No one's buying it from a washed-up diner girl with a chip on her shoulder. Leonard's lawyers will bury you before you blink. The door slammed behind him, the sound reverberating through the empty house. Nora slipped back in, her eyes wide with concern. You okay? Not yet, I said, grabbing my phone, my hand steady now, fueled by purpose. I found emails from Dr. Evelyn Pierce. She's been digging into Ethan's department. Time to call in the cavalry. The lobby of Street Luke's hospital buzzed with its usual chaos, nurses darting with clipboards, patients shuffling toward check-ins, the antiseptic air thick enough to choke on. For years, I'd walked these halls proud, Ethan's wife, his silent cheerleader, nodding at staff who'd called me Mrs. Caldwell with warm smiles. Now, I moved through it like a ghost, every greeting laced with pity or ignorance, every glance a question I couldn't answer. At the reception desk, I leaned in, my voice a low murmur. I need Dr. Evelyn Pierce. No appointment, just tell her it's about Dr. Ethan Caldwell and some financial irregularities worth her time. The receptionist's eyes widened, a flicker of recognition passing through them. She picked up the phone, speaking in hushed tones. Minutes later, a security guard in a stiff navy uniform appeared, his badge glinting as he gestured for me to follow. This way, ma'am. He led me through a maze of corridors to a corner office on the 5th floor. The door marked Dr. Evelyn Pierce, Chief of Surgical Oversight. She wasn't the stern bureaucrat I'd pictured late 50s, her dark hair streaked with silver, her eyes warm but piercing as she rose from her chair, waving the guard out with a flick of her wrist. Lydia Harper, she said. Not a question, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too much and still stood tall. I figured you'd show up sooner or later. I slid my USB drive across her desk, its black plastic catching the light. This is why. She plugged it in, her face a mask of calm as she scrolled through the files, bank transfers, emails, forged patient charts, though her fingers tightened on the mouse, betraying the storm beneath her composure. How long have you known about Cassie? I asked, breaking the silence. A few months, she said, her gaze flicking up to meet mine. The rest? The money? The discrepancies? I've had suspicions for years. Ethan's untouchable, or so he thinks. Leonard Vaughn's influence runs deep, too deep. What if it didn't? I pulled out a second USB, holding it like a grenade. Everything's here, prescriptions for patients who don't exist, billing scams, offshore cash funneled through shell companies. One email, and it's on every news desk in the state. Evelyn's brows shot up, a rare crack in her facade. That's a hell of a sledgehammer, Lydia. He humiliated me on my graduation night, I said, my voice splintering, the memory of Cassie's hand in his flashing like a wound. 10 years of carrying him, propping him up, and he walks away like I'm nothing. Justice or spite? She pressed, leaning back in her chair, her eyes searching mine. Both, I admitted, raw and unfiltered, the truth spilling out like blood. She walked to the window, staring down at Ethan's gleaming Audi in its reserved parking spot. a trophy of the life I'd helped him build. I vouched for him, his residency, his early years here. Brilliant hands, sharper mind. I thought he'd be a leader, not a leech. But ambition ate him alive, and Leonard fed it. She turned back, her expression hardening. "What do you need from me?" "Internal audit records," I said, my voice steadying. "And any complaints about his department that got buried." "That's locked tighter than Fort Knox," she replied, crossing her arms. "So's drug fraud," I countered, holding her gaze. A ghost of a smile flickered across her lips, faint but real. "You're not the quiet little spouse Ethan painted you as, are you?" She opened a drawer, pulling out a thick file, its edges yellowed and creased. "These are complaints I've salvaged over the past year, ones that never made it to official review." Nurses bullied into silence. Patients brushed off. Procedures fudged. I reached for it. She held it back, her grip firm. "This road's a one-way trip, Lydia. Ethan falls, Cassie goes with him, Leonard's whole machine comes crashing down. People get hurt, patients, staff, innocents who trusted him. Like you trusted him. You ready for that weight?" I saw that party again, Ethan's hand in Cassie's, the glass shattering at his feet, the fairy lights mocking me. "Some weights are worth carrying," I said, my voice low but resolute. She handed me the file, its heft a promise and a burden. "We do this by the book, no leaks, no chaos. Deal?" "Deal," I said, the edges of the folder biting into my palms. That night, I spread Evelyn's files across my dining table, a battlefield of paper and ink, yellowed pages detailing hushed-up errors, a botched surgery dismissed as complications, a nurse threatened with termination for questioning missing meds, drugs vanishing into thin air with Ethan's signature scrawled at the bottom. I worked past midnight, post-its and highlighters mapping a web of deceit, my coffee growing cold as the hours ticked by. My phone buzzed. "Nora, Ethan's moving out tomorrow morning. Want me there?" I glanced at the chaos of evidence, then typed back, "No, I've got this. Stay safe." The next day, I watched from the window as he loaded boxes into his Audi, Cassie hovering nearby, her blonde hair whipping in the breeze, her nervous glances darting toward the house. He didn't look up, didn't see me standing there, but I saw him, the man I'd loved, now a stranger hauling away pieces of our life like they were trash. 3 days later, Evelyn called me to her office, sliding a fresh manila envelope across her desk, its edges crisp and new. More complaints, nurses from Ethan's old shifts, finally breaking their silence. They're terrified, but they're talking. I added them to my growing stack, each page a brick in the wall. I was building testimonies of forged charts, hushed threats, patients left in pain while Ethan climbed the ladder. 2 weeks into the fight, the evidence towered like a fortress, its shadow stretching across my living room. "Have you seen him?" Evelyn asked one afternoon, her voice soft as she studied me over her desk. "From a distance," I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "He's holed up with Cassie at Leonard's beach house on the coast, storybook romance, right?" "You still in this?" she pressed, her tone gentle but firm. "The board meets in a week. Once we step into that ring, there's no ducking out." Before I could answer, her office door flew open with a bang that rattled the framed degrees on the wall. Ethan stormed in, his scrubs wrinkled and stained, his face flushed with a fury I'd never seen. "What the hell are you doing, Lydia?" he roared, his voice bouncing off the glass walls, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Nurses won't scrub in with me. Patients are switching doctors. Marcus won't even return my damn calls." Evelyn rose, her posture rigid. "Dr. Caldwell, this is highly. Save it," he snapped, cutting her off as he rounded on me, his breath hot and ragged. "This your big revenge play? Turning my mentor against me, poisoning my reputation with your petty little crusade?" I met his glare, unflinching, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Your reputation? The one you built on fake records and buried complaints? Tell me, Ethan, how many patients suffered so you could play hero? His voice dropped, a desperate edge creeping in as he stepped closer, his shadow falling over me. You don't get it, Lydia. This field, it's a war zone. You cut corners to survive, to stand out. I did it for us, for the life we wanted, the house, the cars, the future. Bullshit, Evelyn interjected, her tone ice cold, cutting through his plea like a scalpel. I've thrived here 30 years without compromising my oath or my soul. Ethan gripped his hair, tugging at it in a gesture that once melted me, now a crack in his armor. Evelyn, you've been my rock. My guide, don't let her burn me to the ground over this. You burned yourself, I said, stepping forward, my voice rising with every word. Patients hurt. Staff silenced. That's your legacy, not mine. What about Cassie? He threw back, his eyes wild. Leonard, can't shield you anymore, Evelyn finished, her voice a quiet hammer. Next week's board meeting isn't just about you. Ethan, it's about the whole rotten system. Your girlfriend's daddy propped up with dirty money and dirtier lies. He lunged toward me, his voice dropping to a raw whisper. Lydia, please, we can fix this. I screwed up. I know it. But we can work it out. You and me. Don't, I snapped, recoiling from his outstretched hand, my skin crawling at the thought. You don't get to beg now. Not after you humiliated me in front of everyone I love. His face hardened, the pleading vanishing behind a mask of defiance. Fine. You want a war? You've got one. Leonard's got lawyers that'll shred you both, judges in his pocket, cops on speed dial. I'm untouchable, Lydia, and you're nothing but a bitter ex with a vendetta. His pager buzzed, a shrill beep cutting through the tension. He swore under his breath, glancing at it before storming out, the door slamming so hard it rattled the frame. I sank into a chair, my hands trembling, adrenaline crashing through me like a tide. Evelyn poured 2 glasses of water, spiking mine with a splash of bourbon from a desk drawer. Drink, she ordered, sliding it over. Then we plan. I sipped, the burn steadying my nerves, the alcohol a faint echo of the fire inside. He's right about Leonard, the first said, my voice low. He's a titan connected, ruthless. Which is why we don't miss a damn step, she replied, pulling up an email on her screen and turning it toward me. Marcus sent this an hour ago. He's been digging on his own. Ethan's been writing prescriptions for Leonard's private clinics, meds that never reached a single patient. Hundreds of thousands in profit, funneled through shell companies. My breath caught, the room tilting slightly. Drug trafficking? Hidden behind a veneer of legit practice, she confirmed, her voice grim. It's bigger than we thought, deeper, deadlier. Leonard's not just protecting Ethan, he's protecting a whole operation. She paused, her eyes locking onto mine. This is your last chance to walk away, Lydia. We've got enough to end Ethan's career, strip his license. Call it a day. You don't have to take on the whole beast. I thought of those files, the names of patients betrayed, nurses gagged, the weight of 10 years I'd poured into a man who'd thrown me away. No, I said, my voice firm, final. We finish it, all of it. For them, not just me. Evelyn nodded, a flicker of something pride, maybe crossing her face. Then we'd better get to work. 4 days later, Nora burst into my apartment without knocking, her face pale as she shoved her phone at me. The screen blazed with a headline, Prominent Surgeon Alleges Harassment by Vengeful Ex-Wife. Ethan's interview painted me as a scorned lunatic, twisting the graduation party into proof of my instability. She threw a glass at me, unhinged, right in front of our guests. A second article followed, Leonard Vaughn's voice booming through, quotes, Dr. Caldwell's record is exemplary. We're launching an inquiry into Dr. Pierce's conduct, possible bias. My hands grew cold, the phone slipping slightly as I scrolled. That manipulative bastard, I muttered, tossing it onto the couch. He's trying to bury us before the board meeting. There's more, Nora said, pulling up another piece. Leonard's calling for an internal review of Evelyn, suggesting she's targeting Ethan out of jealousy. My phone rang, Evelyn's number flashing. "You've seen it?" she asked as I answered, putting her on speaker. "Just now," I said, my voice tight. "What's our move?" "Marcus's place. 1 hour," she replied, her tone clipped. "And Lydia, watch your tail. I think we're being watched." Nora insisted on driving, her hands white-knuckled on the wheel as we wove through the city, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror, paranoia spiking with every car that lingered too long behind us. Marcus's apartment was a cramped walk up in a quiet corner of town, the smell of coffee and old books greeting us as we stepped inside. Evelyn was already there, pacing, her silver hair catching the dim light. 3 nurses, Clara Evans, Tessa Moreno, and June Kim, sat on a sagging couch, their faces tight with resolve and fear. "These are our witnesses," Evelyn said, introducing them. "They've documented Ethan's dirt, falsified reports, missing meds, threats." "We'll lose our jobs," Clara said, her voice steady but thin. "Leonard's got tentacles in every hospital board from here to New York." "Not if we win," I replied, my voice shaking slightly but firm. "I've got evidence of retaliation. Whistleblower laws protect you. We're not just fighting for me anymore." Marcus emerged from the kitchen with a tray of mismatched mugs, steam curling up as he set them down. "Bad news, the board meeting's been moved up. Tomorrow morning, not next week. They're rushing it to catch us off guard." "Then we hit harder," I said, spreading our files across his coffee table, a chaotic mosaic of proof bank records, emails, nurse statements, patient complaints. "We've got the recording Marcus nabbed Ethan and Leonard haggling over drug quotas." That's our ace. We worked through the night, fueled by coffee and cold takeout. Nora ran out to grab at midnight, refining every testimony, cross-checking every date. Around 1 a.m., Nora pulled me aside, her voice low. "Someone broke into your place while we were gone, files tossed, drawers open, nothing taken." My pulse spiked, a chill racing down my spine. "Cops?" "Filed a report," she said, shrugging helplessly. "But the officer mentioned Leonard by name. Good man, shame about this mess." Sounded like a fan. I walked to the window, peering out at the quiet street below. A black sedan idled across the road, its headlights off, the faint glow of a cigarette inside the only sign of life. As I watched, it pulled away slowly, disappearing into the dark. "They're scared," I said, turning back to the group, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Which means we're close." Clara spoke up, her dark eyes fierce. "Those fake scripts, they started small, 2 years back, just a few pills here and there. Then Cassie showed up, and it exploded boxes of opioids, benzos, shipped out under Ethan's name." Tessa nodded, twisting a strand of her black hair. "I caught him once signing off a chart for a patient who'd been discharged days before. He told me to mind my own business, or I'd be out on the street." June, the quietest, added, "I tried reporting it missing oxycodone. Whole trays gone." Next day, my locker was trashed. A note inside, "Keep quiet or you're next." The room fell silent, the weight of their words settling over us like a shroud. By 3 a.m., as the others gathered their notes to catch a few hours of sleep, Evelyn pulled me aside, her hand on my arm. "Whatever happens tomorrow, Ethan misjudged you, Lydia. You're not just some scorned ex, you're a force, and I'm damn glad you walked into my office." I hugged her, a sudden impulse that surprised us both, tears pricking my eyes as I buried my face in her shoulder. "Thank you," I whispered, "for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." Nora drove me home in the pre-dawn dark, the city a blur of sodium lights and empty streets. I thought of Ethan's threat in Evelyn's office. "You've got no idea what you're stepping into," and realized he was right. I hadn't known, not then. But now, with every file, every witness, every scar he'd left, I was ready to find out. The boardroom at Street. Luke's was a pressure cooker, its long oak table a battlefield. the air thick with tension and the faint scent of polished wood. Leonard Vaughn presided at the head, his silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights, his tailored suit a silent declaration of power. Ethan sat to his right, his scrubs traded for a crisp blazer, his face a mask of practiced calm. Cassie flanked him, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, her designer blouse crisp, her eyes darting nervously despite her rigid posture. The other board members filled the remaining seats, their expressions carefully neutral, their hands resting on folders they hadn't yet opened. Evelyn and I sat opposite, our evidence spread before us like a suit of armor files. Recordings, statements, a fortress of truth. Marcus stood near the door, his lean frame tense, watching every move like a hawk. Leonard's voice slid into the silence, smooth as oil. Let's note for the record this meeting's irregular, called under duress. Irregular times demand bold measures, Evelyn replied, her tone cool and unyielding. Shall we start with the prescription fraud or the patient complaints? Ethan shifted in his seat, a bead of sweat glistening on his forehead, betraying the calm he clung to. A board member, a wiry man with wire-rimmed glasses, spoke up, his voice cautious. Dr. Pierce, these are grave allegations. If they prove unfounded, the consequences to your career? They won't, I interrupted, sliding copies of our evidence across the table, the pages fanning out like a deck of cards. Everything here is documented, verified, witnessed, irrefutable. Leonard barely glanced at the papers, his fingers steepled as he fixed me with a stare that could have frozen fire. Miss Harper, given your personal history with Dr. Caldwell, perhaps you should recuse yourself from these proceedings. Bias clouds judgment. I stood, my chair scraping back, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside. My history with Ethan doesn't cloud me, it qualifies me. 10 years watching him bend rules, cut corners, justify every lie with that charming smile of his. The only difference now is I've got the proof. I circled the table, handing out documents with a precision honed by years of balancing ledgers, prescriptions written for ghost patients, medications diverted to Leonard's private clinics, bank records tracing the profits to offshore accounts. This isn't just about Ethan, I said, pausing beside Leonard, my voice rising with every word. It's about an empire built on betrayal, patients ignored, nurses silenced, drugs sold for profit while you sat at the top counting the cash. The room temperature seemed to drop, the air crackling with unease. Cassie gripped Ethan's arm, whispering something sharp and urgent in his ear, her composure cracking. This is absurd. Ethan leapt up, his chair tipping back with a thud, his voice a roar of defiance. These allegations are the ravings of a bitter ex-wife and a mentor who can't stomach being outshone by her protege. Then you won't mind if we call our witnesses, Evelyn said, her voice calm but cutting as she nodded to Marcus. He opened the door, ushering in Clara, Tessa, and June, their scrubs crisp despite the exhaustion etched into their faces. Clara spoke first, her voice steady as steel. I caught Dr. Caldwell falsifying post-op reports, patients listed as stable, who'd been discharged or worse. When I asked, he told me to keep my mouth shut, or I'd be scrubbing bedpans by week's end. Tessa followed, her hands twisting together as she recounted, I tracked missing medications, oxycodone, fentanyl whole trays, vanishing from the lockup. He signed them out, claimed they were used in surgery, but the patient logs didn't match. June, her quiet demeanor belying her resolve, added, I reported it once missing benzos, dozens of vials. Next shift, my locker was smashed. A note inside, shut up or you're done. He stood there watching me clean it up, smirking like it was a game. Leonard slammed his hand on the table, the sound a gunshot in the silence. This is nothing but hearsay and circumstantial nonsense. Marcus stepped forward, his phone in hand, and pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room, clear and damning. Leonard, we need another $50,000 this month. Push the quotas up. I'll cover the charts. Leonard's reply followed. Keep it clean, Caldwell, or we're both sunk. Ethan's face drained of color, his hands gripping the table as if it could anchor him. Cassie bolted upright, her chair scraping back. Dad, we're leaving now! Sit down, Leonard barked, his voice a whip, but she spun on Ethan, her eyes blazing. You swore this was locked tight. You and Dad promised no one dig this deep. I'm not losing my license over your screw-ups. Enough! A board member, a stout woman with gray curls, cut in, her voice sharp. Dr. Caldwell, Miss Vaughn, step outside. We need to deliberate this matter privately. Leonard rose, his glare a promise of retribution as he ushered Ethan and Cassie out, the door closing with a thud that echoed like a gavel. For the next 2 hours, Evelyn and I laid out our case, every prescription, every complaint, every cover-up meticulously documented, our voices steady as we answered questions, countered doubts, and watched the board's neutrality crack into grim realization. When we finally emerged, Marcus was waiting in the hall, his expression a mix of relief and urgency. Cassie's gone cleaned out her locker. Rumor is she's lawyering up to cut a deal. Ethan's been escorted out by security. DEA's rolling into the parking lot as we speak. I walked to the window, watching as Ethan was led to his car, his blazer rumpled, his head bowed. He looked up, sensing me somehow, and our eyes met across the distance, a fleeting glimpse of the man I'd married, brilliant and ambitious, now broken by his own hands. He turned away, disappearing into the swarm of badges. Evelyn joined me, her hand light on my arm. Board suspending his license pending a full investigation. Leonard's been asked to resign effective immediately. The nurses are protected under whistleblower statutes. They'll keep their jobs. It's not over yet, I said, nodding toward the federal cars lining up below, their lights flashing silently. No, she agreed, her voice soft but sure. But we landed the first blow. 2 weeks later, the fallout hit like a storm. News reports tracked Ethan's unraveling his license stripped. His name splashed across headlines, his perfect life crumbling under the weight of indictments. I watched from a distance, a spectator to a collapse I'd set in motion, until one gray morning when he appeared at my door, a shadow of himself in faded jeans and a wrinkled shirt, dark circles carving hollows under his eyes. 5 minutes, Lydia, he said, his voice a rasp. Please. I should have slammed the door, but something pity, curiosity, a ghost of the past made me step aside, letting him into the home we'd once shared. You look like hell, I observed, noting the stubble on his jaw, the tremor in his hands. Yeah, well, being indicted for drug trafficking does that, he said, pacing the living room like a caged animal, his footsteps scuffing the hardwood. Cassie singing to the prosecutors every deal, every drop. Leonard's fled the country, left me holding the bag. Everything I built, it's ash. Everything you stole, I corrected, crossing my arms as I leaned against the wall, watching him unravel. I came to ask for your help, he said, stopping to face me, his eyes pleading, desperate. The DA respects you, your job, your degree. If you told them I was a good doctor once, that I cared about my patients. I laughed, the sound harsh and hollow, cutting him off. Are you serious? You didn't care, Ethan. You cared about money, about status, about impressing Leonard Vaughn and his little princess. He flinched, his shoulders sagging. I cared about us, he shouted, his voice cracking, making me step back. Everything I did, every corner I cut, every deal I made it was to give us a better life. The one you deserved. Us? I stepped closer, anger burning away the last threads of fear. There hasn't been a news since you humiliated me at my graduation, since you planned your exit with Cassie while I was still celebrating the degree I bled for. Remember that night, Ethan? While I was toasting 10 years of sacrifice, you were plotting with her. The doorbell rang, interrupting his response, a sharp chime that jolted us both. Through the window, I saw Nora and Marcus on the porch, their faces grim. "Your timing's impeccable," I called, opening the door to let them in. Ethan was just leaving. "Actually," Marcus said, his voice low and urgent, "we came to warn you. Cassie's dead, found in her apartment this morning, apparent overdose. But given everything Leonard's reach, it's suspicious as hell." Ethan staggered backward, collapsing onto the couch, his hands burying his face. "What?" he whispered, the word muffled, broken. "How?" "Looks staged," Nora said quietly, her eyes flicking to me. "Cops are digging, but word is Leonard never forgave her for cooperating with the feds." Ethan leapt up, his hands tearing through his hair, his voice rising in a panicked spiral. "Oh God, what have I done?" "He'll come for me next, Hill. Go to the police," Marcus cut in, his tone firm. "Tell them everything you know about Leonard's operation. Every name, every drop point. It's your only shot." Ethan's eyes darted to me, wild and lost. "I can't, he'll kill me too." "He'll kill you anyway," I said, surprising myself with the calm in my voice, a stillness born of clarity. "Your only chance is to tell the truth for once in your miserable life, Ethan. Do the right thing not for me, but for the patients you screwed over, the ones you let bleed while you chased your next high." He stared at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years, his shoulders slumping as the fight drained out of him. "Will you come with me?" he asked, his voice small, a plea from a man I barely recognized. Part of me wanted to refuse, to let him drown alone in the mess he'd made, just as he'd left me to sink at that party. But a larger part, the part that remembered the young doctor who'd once stitched up a kid's hand in the ER with gentle hands, and a goofy grin, nodded. "Fine," I said, my voice flat, "but not for you. For them, for Cassie, for everyone you hurt along the way." The drive to the police station was a silent purgatory, Nora following in her car while Marcus called Evelyn to update her. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the city blurring past, his hands twisting in his lap. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he said finally, his voice a whisper against the hum of the engine. "No one ever does," I replied, my eyes fixed on the road. "But we make choices, Ethan, and then we live with them or die by them." At the station, I watched from behind a one-way glass as he gave his statement, his voice trembling as he spilled it all: Leonard's drug ring, Cassie's role as a courier, years of lies layered over ambition and greed. With every word, his shoulders sank lower, the weight of his confession pulling him down like gravity. Evelyn arrived as he finished, pulling me into a fierce hug that smelled faintly of antiseptic and bourbon. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft against my ear. "Not yet," I admitted, watching Ethan through the glass as officers led him away in cuffs, his eyes meeting mine one last time, a fleeting thread of our past snapping clean. "But I will be." "I actually feel sorry for him," I said to Evelyn as we watched him disappear down the hall, his head bowed under the fluorescent lights. "That's because you're not the person he thought you were," she replied, her hand squeezing mine. "You're stronger, better." Outside, reporters swarmed the station steps, their cameras flashing, their questions a white noise I pushed through with Nora at my side. "Ready for them?" she asked, her arm linked with mine. "No," I said honestly, but that's never stopped me before. Weeks later, I sat with Evelyn in the hospital courtyard, the autumn breeze carrying the scent of coffee from the cafe as medical students hurried past with textbooks and dreams. She slid a folder across the table, its edges crisp with official letterhead. "Project Integrity, your mentorship program's fully funded. They're calling it a new era for Street Lukes." I opened it, scanning the approval, a smile tugging at my lips. After Ethan's conviction, 5 years with a plea deal, and Leonard's arrest in a Monaco raid, the hospital had scrambled to rebuild its name. My idea ethical training, whistleblower support had landed on eager ears. "Have you told Nora?" Evelyn asked, sipping her coffee. "She's already plotting the launch event," I said, laughing softly. "Says it needs to be huge, show the world we're different now." Speaking of different, Evelyn nodded toward the hospital entrance, where Marcus was leading a tour group of new residents, his voice carrying as he pointed out the wing. He's thriving as chief of surgery. Nurses actually smile on his rounds. My phone buzzed a news alert. Dr. Ethan Caldwell sentenced to 5 years. I skimmed it, then set it face down. Old habits, I said as Evelyn raised an eyebrow. But you're right, that chapter's closed. A young woman approached our table, clutching a medical textbook, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. Messy bun. Harper? I'm Elise Evans, Clara's sister. I just wanted to say your testimony at the board hearings, it gave me the guts to report misconduct at my last hospital. How'd it go? I asked, leaning forward. They're investigating now, she said, straightening. I was terrified, but I kept thinking about what you said, courage is contagious. After she left, Evelyn grinned, a rare lightness in her eyes. Courage is contagious? You got passionate up there, didn't you? Maybe a little, I laughed, the sound freer than it'd been in months. But it's true, look at us. Clara and the nurses spoke, Cassie cracked, Ethan confessed, and the whole corrupt mess came tumbling down. Like dominoes, Evelyn finished, her gaze drifting to the courtyard where nurses walked taller, their scrubs a badge of pride in a hospital reborn. First class of mentees starts next week, 20 women, all hungry to change healthcare from the inside. And you'll lead them, she said, standing as her pager buzzed. From bitter ex to whistleblower to program director, hell of a ride. I thought of that ride, the party, the betrayal, the fight, the unexpected allies like Nora, Marcus, Evelyn. You know what's funny? I said, gathering my things from my new office. Ethan always said I was wasting my potential at that college. Turns out he was right about the potential, just wrong about everything else. As we walked into Street Luke's, the shadows of my past faded, replaced by possibility, a hospital reshaped, a future rebuilt, not on revenge, but on something stronger, something lasting. I wasn't just ready for this, I'd been forging it my whole life.